Welcome to the Breakfast Club of Fundraising Leaders. Lovely to see so many people logging on. I think when Katie, my colleague, yesterday told me how many people had registered for this one, I misheard initially, or I thought I did, because apparently 984 people, it's a new record for Breakfast Club, woohoo, registered for this event. And I'm wholly aware that for a free event, not all 900 people are necessarily going to be able to log on this morning live, but quite a few people will end up seeing the recording. But whether you are experiencing this through the recording or live, welcome to Breakfast Club for Fundraising Leaders, and thank you ever so much. Clearly, there's lots of other places you could be. There's always extra tasks you could do, but you've decided to give an hour of your time to this one, and I'm very grateful for it. If this is your first time at Breakfast Club for Fundraising Leaders, my name is Rob Woods. I'm the director of Bright Spot, and I 4 times a year organize this Breakfast Club event with 2 objectives. One is to give you techniques and ideas to help you solve fundraising and leadership problems, and the other is to give you things that you might choose to pass on to your teams. In terms of today's agenda, I'm going to do a topic which I've been long been interested in, which is how you solve the many pressures of short-termism and do things that build value for tomorrow or next year. So it's all about long-termism and solving that difficult challenge. And then the brilliant Emily Casson at about 9:25 is going to do a talk all about AI and the things she's learned so far about what it means for fundraising and some ways we can use it. For best results today, I mean, clearly just being on a session won't make more money, but if you are looking to use this hour as a platform to know things or particularly do things that lead to better value and happier teams and so on, to state the obvious, my advice would be have somewhere where you can capture your ideas, like a notebook. And secondly, find a way to not just rush on at 5 to 10 straight into the next task and the next meeting. You may well have a meeting at 10 o'clock, but find some chance today where you pause and reflect and look at your notes and make decisions about what you might do or who you might talk to do with today's content. When it comes to Emily's session, we've built in a little bit of time for answering questions. Again, clearly AI is such a massive topic. We won't be able to answer everything, but if you've got a question, put it in the chat and start your question with the word question in capitals. Lovely to see lots of you who are alumni of Corporate Mastery and Major Gifts Mastery. Tiny bit later, I might share a tiny bit of detail about those flagship programs for people who don't yet know about them. But again, quite a lot of you have now experienced our training days in-house for teams or departments. If you're curious about that, then do just we'll put a link in the chat box, and there's a simple form there. If you want to find out more and, for instance, talk to my excellent colleague Ben about a training day that's bespoke for your team or a package of training for your team, then there's just follow that link. And similarly, it's such a valuable but also challenging area, corporate partnerships, because what we found is what raises the most money is a bit different from what a lot of leadership in charities, chief execs and chairs of boards necessarily think corporate partnerships should be. We've got really good at solving that, both through training, but also sometimes it takes just an extra step of someone who's very confident and persuasive about this subject, coming in-house and doing some consultancy to help some of your colleagues to get their heads around it. So if that sounds interesting to you, it won't be for everyone, but some of you already know my excellent colleague, Ben. He can have a chat and think through whether that might be a service that might help you get the whole machine moving towards the really serious value of corporate. Okay, So what did I want to talk about for 20 minutes today? I think week in, week out, doing long-termist things just is hard. And goodness knows there's always going to be urgent things that have to get done. But if at some level you buy into the value of building value for the future, for yourself personally in your career, and also as a fundraiser and a leader, I think it's hard because of internal pressures. And it's also obviously hard because of external pressures. And for instance, the beliefs and views of other colleagues, senior colleagues. I mentioned my friend Ben. He said to me once that his very first job as a corporate fundraiser, someone senior at that charity came and told him what they thought the strategy should be for corporate. And it was to get a list of the FTSE 100 companies and write to them and ask them to do their bit and donate to this very good cause. Ben has ended up not doing that strategy. And in fact, the direct opposite of that short-termist, just go and ask everyone, is the reason why he tends to get really good results. Maybe that story doesn't resonate for you, but maybe you know a major donor fundraiser who's just basically been pointed in the direction of the Sunday Times rich list and told to go and find some rich people and ask them for money. I'm exaggerating a little, but I wonder if many people on this call, those stories resonate. You've got your version of a colleague, sometimes a powerful colleague, who just doesn't quite get it. That there is a process to what builds value and helps us fund our services. And I've got the privilege now of, after 2 decades studying people who raise a lot of money, and then just in the last 3.5 years, recording those conversations when I interview high achievers for our Fundraising Bright Spots podcast. So across the 133 episodes, there's a lot of success stories, and there's various patterns I note. But a major pattern I notice across all these stories of where people raise more money than many is the pattern that success comes if you proactively add value to relationships with people who care about your cause. Now, there's lots of things about that that's not easy, but if you manage to do that and you do it consistently, then over time, fundraising income will grow. Obviously, part of that is offering them the chance to donate. So asking matters, but ongoingly building value to those relationships is a lot of what the game is, I think. But to come to today's topic, in life and in fundraising, building great relationships takes effort, takes time. It's not necessarily the path of least resistance. And some of the things that you do to create those deeper, better relationships don't bring lots of money in the short term. So I think that's the heart of this challenge paradox, is that we need to fund things this week and this month, and yet in any given week or month, can we also be doing things which build value for the long term? Now, one reason I think it's really hard is to be a human being, or certainly this is my experience, delaying gratification just isn't easy for human beings. If it was, then I would find it easier to walk past cake. And I would find it easier to, eat really healthily, eat more vegetables, and exercise consistently, and save for my pension and so on. A reason many of us struggle in some of these areas is because of, short-term temptation is often more powerful than short-term relative pain and effort. But here's my view. I don't know if you agree with this, but my view is it was never easy. Actually, I think some forces are going on in the world now that make it even harder. To give you an example, about a month ago, my printer broke down, and I was panicking because I really needed to print some stuff. And I was overjoyed to discover that I wouldn't even have to wait 1 day for Amazon Prime to send me the thing. They were able to I clicked the button, and later that very same day, someone came to my house and solved my printer problem because they had the printer part. the risk of sounding really old, it's not that long ago where I remember if I really liked a TV program, I just accepted that I would have to wait 7 whole days till I could see the next episode. Clicking a few buttons on our phone to get access to all kinds of information that would have taken, a trip to the library in the old days, and so on and so on. It's my view that for all of these technical improvements in life, actually, that's lovely, and I like them too. But I wonder if that actually means we are getting less and less used to having to be patient, less and less chance to build the muscle and expectation that sometimes, like, you just do have to wait for the good result that you really want. So I think that can only increase the challenges from within and challenges of impatience from without. So because it's so hard, even though some people might not think this is the sexiest topic, I do believe that there's few topics as important as long-termism that are important to get your head around and have a view on and to do your best to work towards. So across the 20 minutes, I get that probably most of you already kind of, this is in your head anyway, but if something I could do in the next 20 minutes can help you strengthen your conviction in the importance of this, even though it's hard, then I would feel that that was valuable. I plan to do it by sharing some examples of how some other fundraisers have managed to solve this paradox. And I'm going to group those together in 3 key principles so that you can hang them on something. So I was told, some of you know my friend Craig Linton, brilliant fundraiser, legacy and individual giving specialist. He told me a couple of weeks ago this story of the best legacy fundraiser he's ever worked with, called Sarah. And he said one of the things that made her so good was, A, she cares about people a lot, but B, she also twins that with being really organized and disciplined and systematic. And it was her practice that if you left a bequest to her charity, she would, they're kind of obvious things. She would, in any given year, you would get 1 or 2 thank you cards or greetings cards. She would aim to have a thank you, a phone call, catch-up phone call with you. And when appropriate, when possible, she would invite you to an event for the charity. So they're not astonishing tactics, but Craig said Sarah managed to be really organized in doing them. And this particular story that I thought was interesting was, now and again, Sarah would send to people who'd made a bequest a survey. And one of the questions in this short survey was, how many other charities are you remembering in your will? And Sarah told Craig that this particular donor, the first time she filled in the form, there were 20 charities remembered in the will, and they were going to split the money between them. A few years later, the same survey, same donor, it had gone down from 20 to only 5 charities. So somehow 15 of them were no longer in the mix to get the money. And then in due course, Sarah got the sad news, because by this time she'd got to know these supporters really well after this 12, 14 years or so. But she got the news from the executors that the person had died, and that the charity was being given £1 million. Now, the interesting thing about the story was she found out at that point that there was only 1 other charity left in the mix. So the total of 2 million was now split not between 20, but between 2 charities. And I think this is an interesting story because it's a kind of a microcosm for just how valuable things can be if you keep plugging away in the short term when no one's jumping up and down and being impressed. If you can keep going, the truth is it's hard for many charities to actually do that. I mean, imagine the staff turnover and busy at the end of the day, and you still manage to write the thank you card, take a deep breath and be brave enough to make focus. It's not easy to do that, but if we can do that, not just in legacies, but in all kinds of fundraising, I think a reason it's so valuable is because it's hard for most charities to do the long-termist things. So in terms of my 3 principles that I think can only help, idea 1 I think for you as a leader, and potentially to talk about with your team, decide to make this part of your philosophy explicitly. Is it one of your top 6 or 7 values in how you go about fundraising? Maybe it is, but if it isn't, have a discussion about the value of long-termism in amongst your approach to fundraising. In terms of how you might do that, obviously there's books you can read, and equally there's examples all over the place where you see success in life. Really, so often long-termism is the thing that managed to get the person to be winning Wimbledon on the big day, when everyone's impressed with them. Long-termism is everywhere if you look for it. But one tactic you might choose to do is to just study it in various ways. One thing you could do, if you don't already, is subscribe to my podcast, Fundraising Bright Spots. And so many, like I say, of those stories I share with various guests are examples of where someone has managed to do the hard thing day in, day out, and ultimately it leads to the valuable, shiny thing. As an example, Liz Tate, we released this one about 3 weeks ago. Liz Tate, when she was talking about her journey from becoming a fundraiser, individual giving specialist, to becoming a director of fundraising, she remembers quite specifically deciding she wanted to become a director of fundraising, and then finding ways with a mentor, month in, month out, to keep checking in, some level of accountability, to do things that helped her get better at areas where she was relatively weak in terms of overall leadership. And she said it took 18 months between deciding that she wanted to be a director of fundraising and getting the job. And that just is a more steady, gradual, realistic, long-termist approach than many of us, I think, take when we need a new job. So that's one of many stories you could consider. The other image on that screen is of a really good fundraiser called Richard Turner, who I've learned a lot from over the years. He's at SolarAid. One of the things about him and SolarAid is they are very long-termist in their approach to fundraising. And I thought it wasn't a coincidence that Richard Turner said one of his favorite images to look at is this one. This basically is the graph that shows growth in individual giving income for SolarAid over the last 10 to 12 years. And, as, probably the first time Carlos Alcaraz hit a tennis ball, he hit quite a lot of balls out. And look, in the early days of individual giving, the results weren't suddenly lots of riches of gold. But as so often with these things, if you keep plugging away in the short term and medium term, doing the right things, adding value, then over time, the asset grows. And you will see this pattern all kinds of places. And if I think back, first time I did a breakfast club, and there were 28 people there in North London, had a room in North London, I would have been astonished I just wouldn't have believed you if you told me 8.5 years later there'd be many hundreds, 900 or whatever signing up. I just wouldn't have believed you. And what I believe now is most of us overestimate what we can get done in 1 year, and we greatly underestimate how much progress can be achieved in a decade. And certainly I have found that to be true, because I just wouldn't have believed you that the numbers could go up so dramatically in the number of people I'm able to serve in that way. Richard Turner looks at this graph and it helps him believe in long-termism. If at some level it's part of your philosophy anyway, maybe I haven't said anything to strengthen your resolve about this as a value to care about. But basically our main challenge is I just don't have time. It is so hard. There's so many urgent things coming at me in any given week. I get that, and I'm not going to say it's not true, because it's super tough. But if in any given day or week you are to make time for the long-termist activities, here are a couple of thoughts that might help. Again, obvious in a way, but I really like this interview with the brilliant Victoria Rowe from UNICEF UK. And I don't know if you've heard this one yet, or if you know about this approach, but apparently for the last few years, the philanthropy team and others at UNICEF UK have quite deliberately had a next generation approach, in the sense of, whereas many charities, their majority of their major donors are perhaps older, in terms of in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and of a certain demographic. At UNICEF UK, for the last few years, they've quite deliberately created an approach and a style of stewardship, a style of communication, which is more suited to younger people, for instance, in their early 30s, their 20s, and their teens. Now, on the one hand, Victoria's keen to point out, and the truth is, it does generate value. They do give. And yet, maybe if you compared just the short-term cash donated, maybe you could argue, yeah, but it would be more if you were focusing on the older ones. So at some level, why are they doing it? Well, they're doing it because they've got strong insight to justify why they're doing this now. And there's a whole nother story, but legacy fundraisers among you are probably wholly aware that apparently, according to the data, across the next 8 to 10 years, there will be an enormous transference of wealth, bigger than ever before, from the baby boomer generation to younger generations. And what that means is that in 8, 10, 12 years' time, these younger generations are going to be, the philanthropically minded ones are going to be in a better position to make a big difference to causes they care about than they ever have been able to before. And I think this is a very smart approach for UNICEF, and frankly, many charities, to quite deliberately create an offering and a style of communication and stewardship which builds relationships with younger people now. It's valuable now, and oh my goodness, what they're saying is it'll be super valuable in 8 to 10 years' time and ongoingly. So that's a whole nother story as to whether you might kind of take that particular approach and look at your offering. How attractive are we currently to younger philanthropists? But for today's talk, they're able to do this because they've got the insight, they've got the rationale, it just makes sense, they've studied it, and that helps them do the short-term thing, do the long-term thing in the short term. Another idea I've noticed is getting super clear, whatever type of fundraising you do, what are the short-term goals, short-term steps, which we need to give disproportionate focus to, because if we look after these KPIs, these things, it leads to more of the shiny prize that other people are impressed by. And those of you who know my work well know that on major gifts and corporate mastery, one of those major ones is number of conversations, number of coffees you can have with people who care about your cause. I talked to a wonderful fundraiser called Asia Parek a couple of weeks ago when I was planning this talk. She joined our Corporate Partnerships and Mastery program 8 months ago. It's a 6-month program. And a couple of weeks ago, she told me she's now up to 10 partnerships. She was at 1 partnership before she started the program. So she found and created 9 partnerships for Leicester Hospitals charity. They're worth an average of £10,000 each. So on the one hand, actually, that's a bit quicker than some corporate fundraising. I'd say that's success in the medium term, not long term. So well done, Asia. But Asia said, and many people say, a reason why they're able to generate really valuable results is because of what they focus on. If you find what, like, she got some coffees and the partner, company didn't end up partnering, but she got so good at having these conversations and setting them up that in time, looking after the number of coffees, in time, it also led to the valuable results. So for your type of fundraising, do your team know what the small steps are that they should put disproportionate energy into? I guess there's another point here, which is spending time learning is one of the ultimate long-termist behaviors to do, because at the risk of panicking you, during this hour, none of you are getting through your to-do list. But I hope by the end of the hour, all of you will feel that spending the hour on the learning can only make your approach more valuable. So just the act of Asia spending time on masterclasses with us and on coaching calls, she was having to give time to it, but I hoped that she would say that's a reason which helped her generate more value after the masterclass had finished. Both Victoria and Richard also said a version of this, but interestingly, do the long-termist thing when you can. Happy thing about it, it builds value for the medium and long term, but almost always, if you pay attention, you also get some luck in the short term. And you've got to look out for those. So when Cleo from Shelterbox, who'd come on Major Gift Mastery, she got her and her team making these proactive calls on the anniversary of people leaving, making a donation. Lots of times it was just a happy call, thank you so much, and goodbye. And people would become more loyal, but also just now and again, someone would up their donations. One example of someone going from £200 a month to £400 a month the day after they got one of these proactive calls. So whatever wonderful stewardship you do, pay attention as to whether it's helping you get lucky in the short term as well. Okay, last chunk is about how on earth, for many of us, this is the biggest challenge. How do we help our colleagues buy into this? I don't know if your maths teacher often would ask you to show your working, but I do think this is part of how really skillful leaders do this. Like I said, Richard Turner, it's going to help him if for himself and others, he can show past results. Or maybe if you haven't got past results in an area of fundraising, maybe you can use the example, the case study, the story of what happened for someone else. But there's another thing Richard did or does, which I think is really effective at taking people along with him as to why there's a value in patience and steady work towards the goal. And he's created this, he calls it a dashboard to tell that narrative. And basically, it's a simple, clear, colorful way of telling the story. On the left-hand side, there's prospects going down, and on the right-hand side, there's the status of a gift or likelihood of a gift. And in between, there are words and icons which talk about the level of engagement to justify that confidence in a gift. And so, for instance, back in September 2022, the donor on line 2 and the donor on line 6, you look at the colors, amber means gift is likely. So he's able to say to colleagues, I think we can be confident, it's all going in the right direction, gift is likely. And the reason I know that is because, look, we had a Zoom call, that's the icon, in July, and for line 6, October, we had this Zoom call, and that's the point at which they said they're getting ever keener to help. And again, happily, that helps people be more patient. Turns to July, oh, look, line 2 and line 6 have in due course turned green and they got the gift. So what tool, you don't have to use this tool, but what tool are you using to tell the story to help people have faith in and confidence in the patient approach? Secondly, can you help people feel things, the value of this, not just kind of trust the logic of it? My colleague Craig tells a story of working really hard to prepare a watertight, rational case for investment in stewardship from a board of charity trustees and leaders. And they just didn't quite get it. They didn't engage and they got a no, we haven't got money. So he vowed that wouldn't happen again. And he's done this slightly more, or very much more bold approach twice since, and it's worked. Here's what he's done, believe it or not. He's gone into another situation where it just wasn't good enough, the current database software and approach to building relationships. So what he did, to ask for investment and justify it, he got a bucket, filled it with water, he got a tray, and he put it on the table where he was talking to the senior leaders. And he said, the trouble is, every time we're unable to thank people on time, promptly enough, some of those supporters sort of leak out. And at that moment, he punctured a hole in the bucket and some water went out into the tray. And every time we're currently unable to just crudely segment the donor file and thank people appropriately or treat them appropriately, some people feel it misunderstood and they go away. And he made these 4 or 5 holes in the bucket and the water was pouring out. He promised me he didn't kind of then spill it all on their shoes, because that might have undone the good of the analogy. But he said, look, here's a more robust bucket. If it's crazy, if we keep going with a leaky bucket, we just need to get a robust bucket where, you know, the system works. I'm very happy to tell you that they said yes, they got it. They then got the numbers, they invested, and he took great pleasure in the following year in studying the data, in cancellation rates going down, and crucially second gift rates going radically up, I think up to about 75%. And he's done that same tactic again with another charity since. Am I saying you need to go and get slop around with watery buckets with next time you've got to persuade your team? No. Am I saying just use this story to just think, if I really want to persuade people, what could I do to help them feel something, to get the human angle on this, not just the numbers? So at its simplest, a little mini survey of your donors, or talking to your donors, finding the story, finding the quotes, maybe the recording, and sharing that impact of our current way of doing things with your team or with your senior colleagues. Some extra effort to help people feel things, not just think things. And lastly, I know this is really obvious in terms of what good leaders do, but catch people doing things right and celebrate it. In your teams, there are some people who are long-termist, like Sarah. If and when they do something that is consistent with adding value, just notice it, ask them how they do it. Like, make everyone in your team aware that this is the way forward when we can possibly fit it in. And that podcast I did with Alice talks about her sending chocolate bars to everyone who took part in the first thankathon, and they celebrated these thank you calls that they were making. So I'm going to come to a close of my talk soon, but ultimately what I think I've done is some examples which hopefully will further strengthen your existing philosophy that building value over time has to have some place in our working month. And I've given some examples of how you might help yourself win the battle and also potentially persuade others in different ways. Out of all of that, maybe jot a note or two down now as to what you're going to take from it, what you might share with your team. Like I say, we are going to record this and send it out. Maybe you might want to share some of the recording with others. Just before I hand over to Emily, in terms of top tips from me, one of the best long-termist activities, in my view, is time learning. If you don't already subscribe to Fundraising Bright Spots podcast, then it's free. We've got lots of examples like the ones I've just been sharing with you. And of course, the advantage with the podcast is you can get the value while you're doing something else, like the housework or commuting or something. If you do have budget and you want to really go much deeper into corporate or major gifts and lift those results in the next 12 months, then these are our long-standing flagship programs. If you don't know about them yet, then it's a combination of masterclasses with me, individual coaching with one of my colleagues, and 6 months access to lots and lots of other downloads and regular sessions and inspiration. The 1 year version, the platinum level, is $2,995. The 6 month one, which most people do, is $2,395, but we've just launched now, so you're still in the super early bird phase. If you get in touch now, it's £400 off. So it's $1,995. I'm not going to spend loads of time talking about the content. Maybe you know someone who's done this course, or the information on my website. All I will say is, after 9 years of doing these courses twice a year, hundreds and hundreds of people going through them and getting energized, taking action and raising more money, a lot more money than the price of the course. I just know that it works. And the only way I can convey that confidence to you, if you've not heard of it before, is that I'm so sure of it If you're not really pleased by the end of day one and you think the course is not for you, I will not only give you all your money back, I will also personally donate £500 to your charity. That's how sure I am. It's never happened yet, but that's how sure I am, because, you know, it does just work anyway. Do check it out and get in touch via the form in the chat box if you're curious, or just check the information on our website. So thank you very much for listening to my ideas about long-termism. Big topic. 20 minutes isn't long, but I hope at some level I managed to do some things to help you switch on to that. And now it's my enormous pleasure, Emily, if you want to bring up your slides. We're going to change gear now, because one glorious thing about AI is it can speed certain things up, certain tasks up. But my goodness, it's such a big topic. I'm hugely grateful to Emily, not for the first time, preparing a session for our Breakfast Club on an important topic. Emily is such an experienced fundraiser. I remember first talking to her on my first podcast, and when she explained how across a 4-year period at Catch Protection, digital income went up from, I think it was about £250,000 per year to £4 million per year in the space of 4 years. She really knows her stuff. She's now at Salvation Army. Just one last thing is, I'm always so grateful that Emily, you know, she's really good at her job, but she's also extremely generous in doing these things to help the wider community, including small charities, with these kinds of presentations. So thank you for the work you put in, Emily. And without more ado, over to you.
Thanks for inviting me. It's definitely very much the hot topic at the minute. So I hope for the next kind of 15-20 minutes or so, gonna talk to you a bit about what AI is and really inspire you to give it a go, while also talking through some of the key watch outs and things that we need to be aware of as a sector. I don't have all the answers. Anybody who tells you they do, I think there's time to use some porcupines, that we're all learning together. What is AI? It's definitely, like I said, the buzzword at the minute. It's been around for a little while now, but it's really taken off in the last 6 months or so. So it's basically computer systems that can perform tasks that normally would require human intelligence. So the AI is trying to get smarter and smarter. And we're not talking just some of the kind of previous iterations. It's much more nowadays about how it can really understand and learn, and how it can solve problems in ways that stimulate human intelligence. But that sounds really, really complicated. So I actually asked AI to come up with a really simple sentence to describe itself. And it's basically just smart computer stuff that helps machines act and think like humans, which we can all understand. So AI is the future, and everybody's talking about that, but it's also the now. We'll have all seen the stories in the news recently about how AI can now pass the bar exam, that some of the exciting developments it's doing in the scientific realm around what it can learn about the data. And more than a quarter of UK adults have used generative AI, but I mean, everybody's familiar with it. We're all familiar with our Siris and using Grammarly and things like that. But it is getting a lot smarter than it ever was before. I don't know if everybody saw last week, the UN summit, that the AI all came together and they actually decided they could run the earth better than humans, which I'm sure some days we would all agree with them. So the pace of change has never been this fast, but it will never be this slow again. And that's scary, but that's also the world that we live in. Things are changing faster than they ever were before. So when the internet launched, it took 7 years to reach 100 million users. It took 7 years to get that level of adoption. When ChatGPT launched, it took 2 months. I mean, when Threads launched a couple of weeks ago, it took 5 days. So you'll see that things are speeding up and getting a lot faster. So what kind of tools are we talking about when we're talking about AI? This is just a small selection. There are so many different tools. There's so many different tools that can help us with writing and design and marketing, producing images and videos, help with our productivity, get through that to-do list Rob was talking about. But there are so many. But I don't know, like, if you're like me, that all sounds absolutely amazing. I'm blown away. I want to try them all. I want to do it all. But I'm also left feeling a bit like, oh my God, there is so much that we could be doing. There is so much potential out there. Really, where do you start? What can it do? What are the easy things that it can do? So the Charity Digital Skills Report came out last week, and if you've not read it, I would definitely go to the website and download it. Some really interesting insights there. So that survey found that 78% of charities think that AI could really transform the way they work, but only 90% are feeling prepared for it. And I did a session recently, and about 20% of people said, oh, not sure AI is kind of even for us. But AI is coming, whether we like it or not. It's kind of the equivalent of saying, like, oh, not quite sure about this internet thing, or not really sure Google's going to take off. That we need to be aware of it. There's also a growing large-small charity divide. So there's much more large charities saying they're trying it, they're thinking about how they can use it in day-to-day lives. And small charities often don't have the time or the expertise to be able to look at that. And that divide is growing. So how can we narrow that gap? How can we use it? And how can we inspire everybody to give it a go? So I'm going to run through some really basic examples that anybody can go away and do today. So I actually asked ChatGPT how you could help charities, because why not use AI when talking about AI? So I have many great conversations with my little buddy, ChatGPT. So it said it could save us time and resources. I mean, we never ever have enough time as a charity, so great, I'm all for that. Improve efficiency, also accessibility, being kind of on call when humans can't be. It also says it can improve the user experience and it can increase engagement, but it's all very well the chatbot kind of saying that. What does that actually look like in practice? So how can we start? What are the really simple things that we can just go away and start doing? So I need to really think, what's your purpose for using AI? Like, why? We don't want to be using AI for the sake of it. We want to be using it because we can reach more people, because we can meet the aims of our charity better. So some of the things that it's great for is coming up with ideas and also creating content. We never ever have enough time to do that. And the data analysis, that there's so many tools out there now that can really be game changers in how we analyze the data and how we can really improve our segmentation, something like what Rob was just saying the importance of. Also around support interaction, that there are various different chatbots that will now talk to people. And I don't know if you saw the one out yesterday, that there's now a customer service bot that's in the corporate world that can actually have an entire conversation with people for kind of 40 minutes. It can go back and forth, and you would not realize that that is not a human that you are talking to. It's not just kind of pre-programmed script. It's actually learning and thinking. It's also great for saving admin time and crucially raising more money. But I'd also love to hear in the chat about how you're using it, what you've seen that you'd like to try. So in terms of some really practical stuff, so idea generation. We all end up having brainstorms of our charities, thinking of new fundraising ideas, thinking of campaigns. So one really simple tip that you can go away and do is ask it for fundraising ideas. Ask it to pick the best one, and then develop your campaign plan, and then use an image tool to mock up some test images. And one of my top tips would be, the more you interact with it, I use ChatGPT, but there are others like Google Bard and stuff out there. And the more you prompt it, the more it develops. Like the more you tell it, then, you know, it's not a great idea, or, oh, have you thought about this? The more it learns about you and the more it develops. So a really simple case study. So a small animal charity fundraising campaign. Asked ChatGPT to come up with a new campaign. and it came up with a concept, and I created a mock-up of an image with a really cute little dog with a heart. So it's a pretty decent first draft that's quite generic, but it works. So then I asked it to come up with some fundraising ideas for how we could really launch this new fundraising campaign for this small animal charity. So it came up with a few that, again, pretty generic, but they are all pretty usable ideas. And I bet if you went in a brainstorm round the staff room table, you wouldn't come up with much different to this. I then asked it what its favourite was. What did it think would work best on social media? And it really liked its pet photo contest that we were going to launch across social media. It wrote me all the copy that I would need to do it. It came up with a kind of fundraising mechanism of how people would pay to enter and all the different prizes and stuff they'd get. So it really went quite in depth. And I think that is great, because that's not the finished product. That's not the final thing that we're going to go out and launch. But that's definitely a great start for 10 that we can develop and test. And I say 2 minutes, it probably took like 30 seconds to do that on Sunday evening. So it's not something that takes a lot of time. So why don't, in your next kind of team brainstorm, use this to add in ideas, to be that extra person in the room. You can even get it to role play. So you could ask it to play the point of view of, you are a female supporter in their mid-40s. What do you think of these ideas? And that's great. You can do that in real time. You could get it to play the finance director, be like, right, how are we going to persuade the finance director to do this? So there's lots of great ways that you could do this. And another use case is around copywriting and images. I know a lot of charities are now using it behind the scenes for drafting strategy, whether that's for giving a start for 10 or whether that's for picking holes in the strategy. If you can upload your strategy and say, oh, have we missed anything? Anything else you would put in that? And it's great for turning a long form piece. So for example, say you are a medical charity and you've got some quite dense scientific papers, but they're really important stuff that you want to talk about. Why not upload that and ask it to turn it into a series of tweets that are really understandable for the public? You might have to try a bit of back and forth to get the tone right, but how much time could that save you? Or if you're drafting a funding bid or fundraising appeal, though I will say that it does come up with pretty generic stuff, so it's good, but you can spot it. I've been recruiting lately, and you can definitely spot who has used AI in a supporting statement. And also things like using A/B testing for different variations. So say you want to test on your digital marketing campaign, you want to test 5 different propositions. Or you might say to it, can you dial up the need on this one? Or can you make this one a bit more impactful or a bit more emotional? And it can do that. It can even write its own business case. I actually got ChatGPT to write a board paper that I could take to a board about why it should be used and some of the ethical things we need to consider. So I asked around about what AI and fundraising could actually give us, what sort of inspirational, motivational quote could do. So the images, I'm not a pro at kind of my image manipulation, so you can tell that these aren't real, though it's also, I'll come on to bias in a minute, quite interesting what it thinks a digital fundraiser looks like. You'll see some funny examples in a second. So we can free up valuable time and resources, and that will allow us to do the meaningful relationships that Rob's been talking about and actually do the things where you really do need a human to be able to do it. But as a charity, we have a real duty to maximize our effectiveness, to do the best impact we possibly can. So can we really afford not to use these tools at our disposal? I mean, this is my favorite one for what this image generator thinks a digital fundraiser looks like. I have never met a digital fundraiser that looks like that, but please introduce me if you do know them. So it's about imagining a world where every donor can feel seen, valued, connected, that we can do all this behind the scenes to really free up time for that human element. it can make us think bigger about what we can do. It really is going to really change things. So another kind of real life use case that I've been using for the last couple of years is on our donation forms. So I use Fundraiser, and not only could we get AI to write the copy and the different A/B tests, behind the scenes, it's being used on prompts for donations. So when you go to the website and click on that donate button, it knows about you. It knows, have you been before? Have you donated before? What sort of device are you on? Whereabouts are you? Is it holiday time? Is it Christmas time? Kind of what's your browser? And it'll use all of that with 100 different data points behind the scenes to give you a prompt that it thinks is going to be applicable for you, which sounds mind-blowing, but this does it all in real time behind the scenes. And it works. It's a tailored supporter experience. So somebody who's given £500 in the past isn't going to get a £10 prompt, and vice versa. So it's going to be more tailored to that supporter. And so far this year, 76% of our donors have used an AI generated amount, and it's increased income. We have A/B tested this to death. And every single time that AI can outthink and outsmart our best guesses, because it can do that tailoring piece. And there was something out last week, which blows my mind, but is also amazing, that is generative AI and data science together. So that is a real game changer. So you could, and we'll talk a bit about the watch outs in a second, upload data and say, oh, our donations are dropping off slightly. Can you tell us why? Or, oh, our GA4 at Google Analytics isn't looking quite right. Can you fix that? It's in an easy to understand way. And it might come back saying, oh, I've noticed, because you can connect the data, that your donations have dropped off, but your organic website traffic has also dropped off recently. So why not invest in SEO? So that sort of kind of data and AI-led decision-making is going to be fantastic for charities. And also don't forget that our donors are using AI. If I can go and ask what's the best charity to donate to, it gave me Children's Society, by the way, got quite an interesting debate about how it would define the word best, that our supporters are. So we need to not forget that. But this all sounds absolutely amazing. But what are the key things that we need to watch out for? So we need to think about the ethics of this. How can you be very transparent? So for the example I gave around the donation form, we're very transparent on the website and with our donors about how we're using it, why we're doing it. So you really need to think about the ethical side. Also need to be careful. It lies. Like, I asked it to write me a bio for this talk. It gave me a marketing degree. I have a sociology degree. But when I questioned it, it said, oh, presumed somebody involved in this area would have a marketing degree. So you have got to be aware of that. And also there's massive issues with copyright on images and videos. And also remember the bias, that we all know data is only as good as kind of the data set it's trained on. And who is behind this? Who is doing this? There are some more ethical tools coming on the market that's going to be really interesting. And also we need to be so careful with safeguarding personal data that AI does use it. You can, in the back end of ChatGPT and other tools, turn it off, but you really need to think about use of data. And also, like Rob said so eloquently before, not forget the humanness of it, that we want this human-natured approach. So now I've kind of terrified you with minutes on all the kind of different watch outs. How can we use this in the right way? So again, very interesting Sunday evening, talking to ChatGPT about what would a charter for adoption of AI look like for the charity sector. This is a mixture. I didn't like some of their ideas. I added into my own. So how can we really light that spark? So it's about being strategic. It's about thinking how AI can help meet our goals as a charity, how we can really use it to good effect. having a purpose. So we have a really clear intention that matches our values, that we're really intentional about how we use it. But we also have that innovation mindset that we're willing to try, we're willing to grow and embrace that agility. We're also, as a sector, using it in a responsible way, thinking about the ethics, the bias, the privacy, all of that. We also can collaborate, sharing expertise and skills. Like I said, I don't have all the answers, nobody does. So how can we all learn and share together? And feel free to get in touch after this if anybody has any ideas. And the one I added was about you, that we can't forget in all of this the importance of you. So we want to be human-centered. That's what charities is all about, that relational approach. And think supporter first and how we can use it. So that's been a whirlwind. 20 minutes is nowhere near enough to cover everything we could. So what's some kind of practical next steps that you could take? So go away, discuss in your organization, make sure it's on the radar of senior leaders, make sure it's on the radar of teams about how they can use it. Think about the different use cases. I've given you a couple, but there's many more. Build on your skills and learn from each other, because this is going to transform the way we work. Consider the ethics. Just go experiment and think big. Think how it could transform, but start really small and pilot, and then scale quickly or fail fast. So not all of this is going to work, but that's the point of innovating and testing, and share successes. That a lot of people are just at the testing phase at the minute and using this. But no doubt if I came back in a few months' time, there'd be some great case studies of how charities are really using this. And if I've kind of given you anything to take away, it would be just have a go, just on a personal level, just go, just test it. Whether that's kind of working out where you want to go on holiday, or kind of top tips for decorating your house, or whatever it is, go away and test it. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and we then have a few minutes for questions. Like I said, that was an awfully big topic to try and give you an intro to in 20 minutes, but hopefully that gave you a bit of inspiration and ideas.
Thank you ever so much, Emily. Such a good snapshot of the various things that we should be aware of in terms of potential, and some things to be aware of. And sorry in advance, we're just not going to be able to get through all of the questions in the chat, but we're just fitting as many as we possibly can and get Emily's take on them. One from Karen. Emily, what do you think of the ethics around disclosure when AI has been used? Do charities need to state when AI has generated content or a response to supporters?
I think that we do need to be ethical in this area. So the board paper I mentioned, we did have a disclaimer at the bottom. This was written with the support of AI. And I think it depends on the use case. So we're all very used to, for images on fundraising appeals, saying a model has been used in production of this. So I think we need to start doing things like this. And I would say it's highly unlikely that this is going to be the final polished thing that goes out. But certainly for any supporter interaction, that you need to be honest with them, that they are not talking to a human, because then that can really damage support relations if they think they're talking to a human and then realize they're not.
Thank you. Next question. Sorry, I was looking down at one point. You may have already mentioned something here, and I think there were some answers in the chat already, but just in case we haven't covered it, are there any good resources out there that have talked about the ethics of using it in fundraising as something we could use as a source for updating our own ethical fundraising policy that needs a section on AI?
Not that I've seen. I've seen a few people blog and do some ideas, but nobody has yet come up. If anybody has, I would love to nick it. So please kind of let me know.
Thank you. And again, really open. If anyone has answers to these questions, please put them in the chat. It's been so helpful, the conversation so far. Are you aware of any courses that are available now about AI and fundraising where we can go deeper than is remotely possible in this 20 minutes?
Not live at the minute, but I do know that there are some people in the background in the digital space that are currently developing this. So I would expect over the summer to be courses launched, but this is an area that is changing so fast. Some of the things I mentioned kind of came out last week, some are coming out next week, that it is changing so fast.
So thanks, Karen, for sharing some more things in the chat there. I think the key thing is, if some of us haven't just had time to even dip our toe in the water, maybe the most important thing is just to experiment and play, because a lot of the skill, like with anything, just comes once you get in the swimming pool, so to speak. But I wonder if you could zoom in on just one of those examples that you've talked through, Emily. It's a couple of people in the chat saying, could you give us an example of prompts, of how you prompt it to actually do quality stuff, not just sort of, as some people said, waffle, or like missing it by a mile? Because a couple of my attempts, I was just, I blamed it, but I really think it was my skill in giving the wrong level of instruction to ChatGPT. So could you zoom in on one of those and just actually tell us the kinds of things you put in the prompt and how you learn to be more specific to get better quality output?
Yeah, so I mean, prompt engineering is a whole field in itself that is fast developing, but I think it is not just saying come up with a fundraising idea, but saying, imagine you are a small animal charity, this is the kind of level of income you've got, this is your kind of budget. I mean, for that example I gave, I didn't do that, but you could definitely tailor it down. So the more insight you can give around what kind of charity you are, even what kind of, like, what's your tone of voice, what's kind of language you do, ideas. And then the best thing is actually treat it more as a conversation rather than a prompt and a response, actually a prompt response, and be like, not quite sure about that, or, ooh, can we have more ideas like this one? This one's really good. And actually get into a bit of a conversation, which doesn't need to take more than a couple of minutes to kind of go back and forth.
That makes sense. Thank you. Arshingul's asked, is the copy produced by AI accessible to everyone else? Can someone else track what you're doing, what proposals you're writing, and how does that sit with confidentiality?
Kind of for the ChatGPT, you would have your own login. So the bit where I said it's kind of learning and using that data, it's more doing that behind the scenes. So it's more training itself, the more people interact with it, rather than giving your information specifically to somewhere else. But I would definitely be careful around sharing. I wouldn't share any sensitive data on there. I wouldn't kind of use any personal data, just use a bit of common sense at this stage.
That makes sense. I'm sorry, for a couple of people have asked about the sharing of slides. We aren't going to share these slides. We just find it with the software I currently use, it's just it doesn't allow to send out big documents and so on. So we don't show the slides. But if you really enjoyed this session, we are going to send out a link to a recording of this session so that you can go back and take screenshots or whatever of slides, if that helps. I wonder, Emily, anything else? You've sort of helped with this anyway, but if many of our viewers are really kind of realizing they need to give some energy, some experimentation time to this, but they can picture the kinds of reactions from certain people in their organization who just are not going to get it. As with any influencing within an organization, to help organizations be more innovative, what's over the years you've managed to help various charities kind of be more curious. Any tips about, practically speaking, if we were to go away and try and build interest in this, what top tips do you have?
I think I would kind of show the benefits and go heavy on how this could help, whether it's saving time, saving resource, making it more effective, because that's often what people kind of want to hear. And it's a great one to even use ChatGPT to be like, can you play the role of the board? What questions might you have? And I think it will really change when a lot of us use Microsoft Teams at work and the kind of Microsoft suite. They are going to be launching their own version of AI, and in some cases already have, that will allow you to things. If somebody comes late to a meeting, say, it will summarize the meeting so far, it will take the actions, and things like Canva already allow you to produce presentations by use of AI. So I think the more people see it in a way that they're familiar with it, for example, like as much as we all hate Microsoft Teams, that people see it kind of using in that, they will then see actually, ooh, there's these other applications. And I think the more people can see use cases and case studies about how people are using it to raise more money and be more effective, I think that's always one of the best ways to get buy-in. They show that actually we're not the first person to do it. This other charity's tried it, and this is what they've learned, and this is how we can build on it.
Fabulous advice. So a huge thank you to Emily. Of course, it's an enormous and fast changing topic. I'm amazed how much you've managed to cover in just 25 minutes. So thank you so much for all the work you've put in on top of your day job to share this with so many other charities out there. I do really appreciate it. I need to get people away very soon because I said I would. But if I were to wrap up the last couple of things, those of you who are interested in any of the Bright Spot services, then the form is still in the chat box there, or do just go to our website and see the various things about the mastery programs, the early birds available now, and the other things I mentioned with my colleague Ben. We will do another breakfast club in the autumn. I think it might be early October rather than September, but we'll do another one of these because we do them every 2 or 3 months. Thank you ever so much to those of you who are sharing this stuff on social media. I'm always so grateful if you're helping get the ideas out there so that people can access the fruit of the hard work that people like Emily put in. So thank you for that. Thank you for making time for some very long-termist activity over the last hour in that you've spent time in learning rather than doing. I really appreciate it. I really hope it's paid off for you. So thank you for making time for Breakfast Club today. I'll see you on the next one. Huge thank you to Emily. Have a lovely day. Goodbye. That's the end of the Summer Breakfast Club for Leaders. Bye-bye.